With its recent success in Bahrain and finishing on the podium with Fernando and P6 for Lance, Aston Martin is getting accused of cheating. Can you take a guess by who? It is by Red Bull. Red Bull is saying that car information was stolen from their team and brought to Aston Martin. As we know, their now technical director, the guy that makes the cars, helps the cars in the aero department, is Dan Fallows. Really a legend to do what he has done so far with a base model car and really bringing it to light and maybe even bringing the fight to Red Bull in 2023. Before we get into the deeper parts of the video, please leave a like, subscribe. We are on our way to 1,000. Thank you all so much. The support means everything to me. Let's get into the AMR 23 and really what makes it successful. Okay, well, let's get this cheating thing out of the way. The guy that we all know, the guy that loves to bash on any team that's not his own and loves to put down any driver that's not his own, is Helmut Marko. Helmut Marko talks about every team in a really negative way and how they cheat, how they are accusing of this, how this and this. Well, now he's on to Aston Martin because Aston Martin is competitive. So last year, obviously, they kind of quote unquote copied the Red Bull to RB18 and went with the side pod concept that was very similar to the Red Bull. But that was in their wind tunnel from a long time ago. Dan Fallows barely built on the car last year. A couple of last upgrades last year that really helped the team were from Dan Fallows. That controversial rear wing was helped by Dan Fallows. They took something that was kind of bending the rules, but was a smart option. Now in 2023, Dan Fallows has built this car completely from the ground up, made the AMR 23, and Helmut Marko is on them, saying that they're stealing car information. Oh, that the engineers at Winter have a very good memory. He says it's actual philosophy and that the way that the car looks is the most similar to the Red Bull. Well, I mean, I definitely don't agree. I would say that the McLaren is like a carbon copy of the Red Bull. If that's what Helmut thinks, then he can think that. I mean, it doesn't really matter. There's no real concrete evidence to this quote-unquote cheating. And I'm going to give you the real reasons why Aston Martin is so successful and teams like Alpine and McLaren need to learn off of this. As we know, Alpine has had this plan of 100 races before race wins and being actually competitive on the field. Now, if we do know Alpine/Renault, we know that for the past 5 to 6 years, they've been talking about, oh, getting past podiums, getting to wins, being successful. Well, Aston Martin just took their car from the very bottom to the very top, with the exception of Red Bull. They have showed what it takes to actually have, I guess you can call the secret formula to winning, to being a successful Formula One team. Alpine and McLaren have both struggled for these past 4 to 5 years with their quote-unquote goals. Sure, Alpine is very happy with the P4 they got last year. McLaren was very happy with the P3 they got in 2020. But season opener comes around, Alpine far off the pace when it comes to the top, I guess you can say 4 teams now, maybe even 3. And then you also have McLaren, who was dead last in Bahrain and waiting on a big upgrade to come in Baku to actually take the car to a maybe competitive level with the top teams. That's words from Lando, not myself. The things that these teams have been missing, the things that I think most teams in F1 miss, is that competitiveness to just want to be a winner. Not a P4, not a P5 and to be happy with that, but a competitive winner. Not just podiums, but wins. Aston Martin looks at it that way. Alpine and McLaren do not. Alpine are very content with just kind of slowly making their way up, while the car's development is not as aggressive as it needs to be. Clearly, the car in 2022 was a good car. Let's not say that it's a bad one. It was a good car. Engine problems, completely terrible throughout the whole entire season. The car was good, but track dependent. They had a car that actually was competing for a maybe pole position in Australia, which was insane to think that that was even possible from a midfield car. Then, as the season progressed, the top teams ran away and Alpine fell back. And let's face it, Alpine is an engine manufacturer. They make their own engine, meaning that they can buff it up as much as they want to. They don't give it out. No team gets like second hand of it. Considering that, they only need to focus on themselves, not like Mercedes, who has 4 different providers, and Ferrari, who has 3 different providers. They can focus on themselves, they can really buff up that engine and make the best out of what they have. It is just a fact for that team. So for them to not be competitive and now losing to a team that is second-hand, quote unquote, it's crazy to think that these teams just can't put it together. McLaren, same thing, sure. They're on that same level with Aston Martin, second-hand. They get the engine from Mercedes, but the team is now working well together. They've been stuck in this quote-unquote midfield for super long, and it does not help them in any sort of way when it comes to progression, making the car better, and they have not had a year where they actually developed the car from a terrible spot to an amazing spot. Sure, 2022 went from what we thought was going to be a terrible start to the year to a okay year, with the cars sometimes even being out of the points and sometimes barely nicking the points. But these are not things that will make any driver satisfied. Lando Norris, if I'm there, I'm leaving as soon as possible. He needs to get himself in a car that can win. Put him in the top 3 teams. I don't know, for some reason put him in Aston Martin if Fernando Alonso at some point leaves. Have him in a car that's competitive. I want to see that guy compete at the top. But the real secret weapon, what is the secret that Aston Martin has? I'll tell you this. They brought in personnel that they knew was good. They brought in people from Red Bull. They brought in people from Mercedes. Lawrence built this team up. They brought in Fernando Alonso, a guy who's been in Formula 1 for what, 23 seasons now? It's his 23rd season. He has been here. He has seen any car possible. He's driven any car possible. He's driven an oversteer and an understeer car at the same time, an oversteer car, an understeer car. His level of experience is unmatched by anybody on the grid. With that experience alone, you can make a competitive car. With Lando, who's young, Oscar, who's young, you're bringing in talent, but you're not bringing in experience. While Daniel Ricciardo was there, what did they do? They made the car completely opposite to what he can. The guy that works there, I'm pretty sure his name is James Key from McLaren. He has made these really weird cars as of the last 4 or 5 years. And anybody that comes to that team talks about how weird the car genuinely is. What are the problems? Why the car isn't as oversteery and as agile as people want it to be. It isn't a car that is that competitive. They cannot have a strong front end. A lot of people are mad about that when they drive for that car, that the front end is really weak, overtaking is hard. Minimum cornering speed is extremely important on that McLaren, and something that they have struggled to actually take out of that. Their rear end is also pretty weak. The car is just weird on balance. Now the Aston Martin, they brought in a super balanced car, an extremely great driver, an amazing technical officer. Now if that's cheating, then everybody should be cheating in the sport. Aston has proved what McLaren and Alpine have been talking about years is really BS. They need to motivate themselves and see what Aston Martin has done and be like, listen, we need to do that this year. Maybe change some personnel around, bring some new people in, experience is important, and take a page out of what Aston Martin has done. Really, they have shown off to really the grid, to the teams, what it's like to bring a car from the bottom to the top. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world for me, and peace.